Hi, my name is Ben with Ben Talks Talent. I have 10 years experience in talent acquisition, both on the agency and the corporate side, and I manage a team of recruiters, and I'm gonna give you 13 things you should never say in an interview. Let's get started. So the first one, in a lot of interviews, you're gonna have a corporate recruiter or a hiring manager say, "Do you have any questions for me?" The one thing you should never say to that question is no. They want you to have questions. You should want to have questions because you should want to find out if it's going to be a good fit for you. But I can tell you from firsthand experience, whenever someone says no to that question, the first thing that goes through their mind is this person is not interested in the role or they did not prepare. Neither of those things serve you well, so make sure you don't say it. The next thing you should never say is, "What do you do?" If you made it this far, you should know what they do. Whether it's a product, whether it's a service, by the time you get to the point where you're talking to someone from the organization, you need to know what they do, so you never want to say that. The next thing, what would I be doing in this role? What does that say? That says that you did not do your research. Anybody who applies to a role should have thoroughly went through the job description. They should have a little bit of an idea of what someone would do in this role anyway, because you're probably doing something similar currently. And you should be able to put it together. Just saying, "What would I do in this role?" It gives them the impression that you're not familiar with the role and you're not gonna be able to succeed in the environment. The next things. You never wanna say anything that you dislike in your current role that you might have to do, right? Now, I'm not advocating lying, right? But if you're in a role like mine and you're like, "Oh, I hate cold calling," and in this role, you might have to do cold calling, you never want to talk about it. You never want to be like, "Oh, I hate this," because they're going to look at that and they're going to immediately rule you out. Just because you don't like something doesn't mean you can't do it when you need to. So I always tell people, if there is a task that you might have to do in a role you are interviewing for, even if you don't like it, you don't want to focus on that. Generally speaking, you want to be positive anyway, but you definitely don't want to talk about a role and say, "I hate doing this task." The next thing, don't ask about pay or other benefits. This is something that I might get some pushback on. If you disagree with me, feel free to say it in the comments. But here's the thing. They're gonna ask you about pay. Okay, I get that. But for you, if you were saying, "Hey, let's talk about money, let's talk about benefits, let's talk about vacation time," on the front end, it makes them think you're looking for the wrong reason. They think you're focused on the wrong thing. There will certainly be a time to talk about compensation, to talk about benefits, and if they ask you about it, you're gonna have to discuss that, right? But up front, you don't wanna be like, "So what does this role pay?" That is just not a good look, and if you wanna be successful in your interview, which I know you do, I would avoid saying that. The next thing I would do is avoid speaking negatively about other bosses, previous bosses, and other places that you've worked. Why? The biggest reason here is because it gives off the impression that you are going to be difficult to work with. And you don't want that. Whether it is true or not, whether you had terrible bosses in the past or you had good bosses in the past, if you say, "Hey, I had a boss, they were very difficult to work with," warning bells are gonna go off in that recruiter or hiring manager's head. So I always tell people again, you wanna be positive. You don't wanna talk down on previous employers or bosses. Even when it's true, don't say it. Speak positively, avoid criticism on past bosses, past places of employment. The next thing I wanna talk about is being too cocky. I call this threading the confidence needle, because you need to tell them, "Hey, I did this, I succeeded in this way, I moved the needle for past organizations like this." But you don't wanna be too cocky. Now, if you go in there and be like, "Oh, I could do this role with my eyes closed," that may be true, but they're also gonna be like, "Is this the type of person who's gonna work well as a teammate? Are they gonna be good to work with? Or is this cockiness, is this going to make them challenging for us to partner with?" So I would always avoid being too cocky. To me, that's a little bit of a red flag. Let's go to the next one. This would be swearing, saying something inappropriate or political. Anything controversial, I would avoid it in your interview. I would even avoid it if they do. If they're in an interview and they're dropping F-bombs and they're swearing and they're talking politics, I would personally avoid it. Quite frankly, if it's politics, you got a 50-50 chance of that person being maybe on the other side of the coin and them, disliking what you're saying. So I would avoid this, even if it's the way you talk, even if they're talking like that. I have never seen someone not get a job because they didn't swear in an interview. But I have absolutely heard of candidates being removed from the process because things they have said that they probably shouldn't have. So avoid anything controversial like that. That's an easy one to me. The next one, blame the answers that you're giving on your nerves. So interviewing can be a nerve-wracking situation. Everybody gets that. So you might be in an interview, you might be nervous, and you might even be stuttering a little bit or saying something that maybe you wouldn't have said if you weren't in such a challenging, nervous situation. I get that. But I wouldn't blame it on nerves. One, they want someone who's gonna come in and be confident, somebody who's gonna be able to speak to their niche and their area with confidence. And blaming it on your nerves, it's just off-putting from a interviewer perspective. So I would skip over that, and I wouldn't blame my answers on anything. The next thing I would do, or avoid doing, is I wouldn't say anything along the lines of, oh, I've never used your product or service, right? If you're interviewing for a company, and it's a product that is readily available to consumers, there is just no reason to freely offer up, oh, I've never used your product. I use your competitor's product instead. Just avoid saying that. I would strongly caution you to not say something like that. Typically, when I talk to people who have products or services available to consumers, they consider it to be a big bonus when the interviewee says, oh yeah, I've absolutely used your product or service. And that's part of the reason I'm interested in your role. Saying that you've never used it is gonna be a little bit demotivating to them, so I would avoid that. The next thing I would do is I would avoid talking about other interviews. So if you're interviewing with their company, you're probably interviewing elsewhere. And that's okay. But they might not want to hear you talk about it. If they ask you because they're talking about urgency and they're trying to establish a timeline and they go, Ben, tell me about the other places you're interviewing, then it's okay to say, I've got a few other things that I'm exploring. I've got a second interview tomorrow, but I wouldn't bring it up without them asking. If they're like, wow, it was really great talking to you, be like, yeah, it was really great talking to you too. It was almost as great as the conversation I had with another organization that I'm meeting with for a third time tomorrow. I wouldn't do that. If they ask, feel free to indulge, feel free to answer them, but don't just bring it up out of nowhere. The one caveat to that is, say you've interviewed, you've gone through the process, and you're talking with a recruiter, and you're getting to the point where you need to give an answer to another organization. At that point, I might reach out and say, hey, I just want to let you know, I'm really interested in your company, and I've had a really great time, but I have been looking for a new job, and another organization has reached out to me, and I'm in the process with them. Can you give me an idea of when we might be reaching the conclusion of your process? So that I can see that through. That's the caveat there. The next thing I would say is I would never say I was desperate or that I needed this job or I gotta get away from my current employer. I wouldn't say because you don't want to say bad things about your current employer, but you don't want to come off desperate. It makes the person interviewing you feel like maybe you're not really passionate about them. It's more that you're running away from something than running to it. The reality is you always want the person interviewing you feeling like you're running to them. You're interviewing with them because you're interested in that company or in that role. But you don't want it to be about, I just got to get away. You guys seem okay. You're definitely better than where I'm at currently, but it's mostly about me getting away. So I would skip that. The last thing I want to talk about, and this might be a bit of a controversial one, but I feel really passionate about it and I'll tell you why. But the last one is talking about the next role after the one you're interviewing in. So a lot of people make the mistake of, let's just say it's a mechanical engineering role. And they ask you, hey, what is it about this role that you like? And instead of saying all the things they love about the role and how they're going to be able to contribute in that capacity, they say, I think I can come in this role, I think I could develop really fast, and then I can move into a mechanical engineering leadership role. And I got to tell you, I have so many times had a hiring manager come back to me and go, Ben, I just don't think he's the right candidate. He talked a lot more about the next job, not so much about this one. I don't think he's interested in this job. The reality is, most of the time that candidate actually is really interested in that job. But like most people who are driven and career driven, they have the next position in mind, and there's really nothing wrong with that. But the hiring manager wants to know that they're gonna have an investment that's gonna pay dividends. You're going to come in, they're gonna invest in you, they're gonna hire you, they're gonna train you, and you're gonna be in that spot for a while. So even though you may wanna come in and spend a few years and then make that leap, I wouldn't focus on that. If they talk to you about career progression and they talk to you, okay, well, you come in this role, you succeed, do you have aspirations to be in leadership? And that's how you truly feel, that is okay. But I wouldn't lead with that, and I wouldn't offer it up unless they mention it. Because if you do that, they are definitely going to think that you're not interested in this current role and you're going to be a flight risk sooner rather than later, and you don't want them thinking that. So there you have it. Those are 13 things I would never say in an interview. If you like this video and you are still here, please like, subscribe, turn on notifications. That way you never miss another video. Feel free to share this on social media, and thanks for stopping by.